Now we are talking about cybersecurity. McAfee is one of the oldest brands in the internet. And Raj, please come on stage. You're the chief scientist. We're excited to hear if you should worry about cybersecurity.
Thanks very much. This is an amazing time to be in tech. The return on investment for each and every single one of us is remarkable. How many of you actually were fortunate enough to invest in Bitcoin in 2013? That are willing to show your hands. Thank you. I mean, I remember I was doing a research project in 2013, and this new concept of Bitcoin was being discussed, and writing the research paper, the value of Bitcoin was just 1 cent. How many of us wish that we invested more in Bitcoin in 2013? Because just a few years later, we were talking at $20,000 each and every single unit. But the reality is that for those of us that are really fortunate, for those of us that are able to get ahead of the curve, there's tremendous returns. And yet, for the majority of people, even my Uber driver on the way in was asking me, which cryptocurrency should I invest in? For the rest of us, we have to rely upon this great gold rush. And yet, just type into YouTube or type into Google ways to make money through cryptocurrency, and you're going to see a wash of people offering you the opportunity to make these phantom returns that, quite simply, I wouldn't say don't exist, but for the majority of people, that train is well and truly gone. We live in a world today in which cybersecurity is seen as a IT-related issue, and yet it's the fabric of society. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are absolutely crucial. For those of you worried about Brexit are probably asking the question, how did I get it so wrong? And yet, we're also questioning whether that vote was manipulated by a nation state. If we turn this back into the world that we live in, there are businesses out there that, quite frankly, are lying to each and every single person out there. This was actually a cryptocurrency, and they posted the faces and profiles of each and every single person working for their organization. And as you can tell, that is not Kevin Ballinger, but actually Ryan Gosling. And yet the remarkable part is they got investments. I mean, in fact, they got investments to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Until, guess what happens? There's an exit scam. And it's not just the world of cryptocurrency, but all forms of tech. We're seeing this great gold rush, and I would argue that the level of due diligence taken today, the level of due diligence that is taken by today's investors, is considerably smaller than we've ever seen before, to the point that even Ryan Gosling can moonlight as a product developer, a product manager for a cryptocurrency, and get hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment. And the one thing that we've got to recognize, and the one thing that we have to appreciate, is all of these things, whether it's the Brexit vote, whether it's presidential elections, or whether it's something as small as small digital firms lying about what they do, the impact is very real. These are actually real comments taken from people that have lost their entire family wealth. And that's what's happened today. Cybersecurity has been seen as this IT-related issue, but the impacts are absolutely very real. Whether it's investments, or whether it's something like the WannaCry attack, in which patients are being turned away from medical care because, for example, a nurse may open an email. This is the most important topic, I believe, today. And from a macro perspective, the cost to each of us is enormous. A CSIS report calculating the cost of cybercrime determined that in Germany alone, the impact of GDP for Germany was 1.65% per annum.
Why Germany?
Good question. So, the question of why Germany, I would argue that actually most countries suffer almost the same, certainly in Western Europe. But the German government have done such great work in terms of developing a mechanism to be able to report cybercrime. They also do great work to determine the economic impact of that cybercrime. It's probably one of the few countries in the world that are so advanced in determining the cost. Whereas in the UK, and actually other countries around the world, where you can't even report a crime that's been taken digitally. And the one thing that each and every single one of you have to remember today is this is a cost on innovation. This is a cost of lost opportunity. If intellectual property is stolen, you're not the first to market. This is the real cost of cybercrime. This is the real cost of not doing cybersecurity correctly. And we've got a multitude of examples. Whether we like it or not, Ashley Madison, this was a company that bordered upon the ethical, but quite frankly, they were due to be listed. And just before they were listed, there was a major breach, and of course, this company didn't see the light of day, certainly not from an IPO perspective. And every single employee, and not even every employee, but everybody associated with that, lost out on that particular opportunity. And so there is a huge financial cost associated with cybersecurity, and yet we still look at this as a piece of malware. We still look at this as bits and bytes. And we have to appreciate and we have to recognize that today, nation states are getting involved in cyber warfare. And I hate the term cyber warfare, but that's the reality of the world we live in. And it's not just the countries that you can think of. It's not just the countries with red flags. But actually, as we've seen with research done by Citizen Lab, there is an entire industry selling malicious software, spyware, espionage tools to countries like Mongolia and Kazakhstan, because it's a darn sight cheaper to do economic warfare through digital means than it is through traditional means. So what do you need to do? What's the advice that each and every single one of you should take, either as entrepreneurs or looking for that next piece of investment? I would argue that you need to put cybersecurity at the very forefront of what you do and be bold and transparent about it. Earlier this year, we did some research into a product. This was a smart padlock called BoxLock. It was actually on Shark Tank in the United States. And we found a vulnerability that allowed us as researchers to be able to bypass the authentication. In other words, we could unlock this particular device from any phone. We were using Bluetooth Low Energy as the initial entry vector. And so we did what we normally do. We contacted the manufacturer and we told them of this vulnerability. And usually, when we contact manufacturers, the response is less than favorable. That's putting it very mildly. But BoxLock were remarkable, and what they did was they had a vulnerability disclosure policy, they fixed the solution and had it rolled out across all of their platforms within 10 days. Which to me is incredible. And not only that, but when we started to tell the world about these vulnerabilities, they were actively getting involved. They were actively retweeting the stuff we were talking about. They were actively telling the world about the vulnerability and how they fixed it. They took a problem and they turned it into an opportunity. And being open and being transparent and putting cybersecurity at the forefront of what you do, not threatening researchers, being open about all of this, to me, is the way forward. You know, every single company out there at some point will face a cybersecurity issue. Guaranteed. And I know that's a depressing thought, but how you handle that and how you manage that will be the difference between success and failure. Not being transparent and not being open about it and trying to hide the truth in a world of social media, we know is not going to work. By being open, by working with the community, by working with the industry, you have the opportunity to be able to change the narrative. And putting cybersecurity at the forefront, not only with your engineers, but at the board, I believe will be the path to success. Thank you.